Hello everybody out there in YouTube land, and welcome to DC Fans United. So this is going to be kind of a different video. It's basically a culmination of lots of thoughts that have been rattling around in my head for the past couple of years. So essentially, comics is not a very healthy industry. Now, a lot of people will not agree with that, but I think the writing is really on the wall in a lot of ways. All you have to do is look at ComicChron.com, and it has all of the numbers of the comics that are shipped every month, and they've been doing it for decades. So it's really easy to just go back and look at the numbers. Overall sales are pitiful. It's really sad to see an industry that was moving millions of copies of single issues like X-Men, but now Batman doesn't even move 100,000 units. If your comic ships over 100,000, you're guaranteed to be in the top 5. So that's pretty astonishing if you think about it. Now, there are more titles overall than there ever has been, so that does help prop up the overall numbers. There's another thing with the cover price ever increasing, so that generally they can still make a profit even if they're selling less units. It's now gotten to the point, however, that even the increased cover price isn't making up for the lost unit sales. And I understand that even as just a YouTuber, you only make whatever, a few cents here and there on your videos, but each of those few cents, if you combine them hundreds of thousands of times, it can actually add up to a decent amount of money. So it's the same thing with any product, a hot dog, right? You sell a hot dog for $1.50, that's only $1.50. Yeah, but what if you sold 300 of them? It's the same thing with comics. So back in the day when they were selling for $1.25 and they moved 500,000 units on something like Green Lantern or something, it's hard to understate how unhealthy the comic book industry is right now. And a big part of that is because there's so much denial within the industry itself. But when you look at things like the amount of comic book shops that are closing month over month and year after year, and there's less and less of them throughout the country, it really snowballs and just makes things worse. So with all of that being said, and just kind of laying out some of the reasons, some of the things that you can observe within the industry being a problem, let's try and think about ways that we can improve things. So one thing that people really hammer online in particular is the ideological stuff within DC and Marvel. So they tend to have a left-wing slant on overall as a whole. If you were gonna say they were right or left, they're generally like center left at DC and sometimes far left at Marvel. But sometimes I wonder if this is an overemphasized reason for there being a problem within the industry. I think there's a lot more that's inhibiting sales and growth right now aside from that. Now, I do think there's a few problems in particular. I'm really not a fan of Bendis writing Superman. I didn't have any problems with him coming to DC, and if they'd just rein him in a little, I think it wouldn't be so bad. Like, he could have his own, Wonder Comics is his imprint. See, they gave him his own imprint, but just have him reined into there, and it can just burn out and go away, Black Label and Vertigo and Wildstorm and every other imprint DC has. But anyways, it is a problem when you have flagship characters like Superman that were actually coming back after all the damage that was dealt to Superman during the New 52, and that was finally starting to be dealt with at the end of New 52 with Lois and Clark, and then in Rebirth. It was great. It was like the old Superman again, and in some ways even better. It was like the super dad, right? He's with Lois, and they've got John, and it's just a nice, happy family for like a couple of years. And then Bendis came on and just had to wreck all that. So I do think that kind of thing is hurting sales, and that's just the one that's affected me most personally. And I could go on and on about it. And I did give him a chance. I read his stories in DC Nation and Action Comics 1000, but his Superman run's just been not for me. But that is a part of it. So that's something that probably can't be fixed right now, the ideological and the writing, the choices of writers and stuff. The best we can hope for right now is just damage control. Put the bad books on the imprints, which I do think they've been doing, like Vertigo. I'm sorry, Vertigo fans, but Vertigo's become a dumping zone for DC. You know, any of their trash books, they're just like, put it on Vertigo, you know, it's going to get canceled in 2 months anyway. Their good books get canceled anyway. We're talking about New Age of Heroes recently. That's down to 2 titles. And anyways, so these are mostly problems. We need to start focusing on what can be fixed. I'm just going to put aside the ideological stuff for right now. I don't think that's going to be an easy fix, and there's tons of people that are fighting that fight every day, trying to get politics out of comics. The things I think that could be fixed, and everyone should be in agreement on, whether they're right or left or whatever, is we need to increase the access to comic books. There's a serious lack of comic book shops. This is a huge problem, and it's only getting worse as more and more shops close down. I live in a very rural state. The only comic book shop I'm even aware of is 60 miles away from me. So that's a 120-mile round trip. So it's not likely I'm going to be making it to many new comic book days on Wednesdays. I would go there when I could, but there's this whole other side story of the owner being really rude, so I stopped going. But there's no other competition, so I think he's like that because he knows he essentially has a monopoly. So the biggest thing we need to fix right now is the lack of access to comic books. You know, you can print as many copies as you want, but if they aren't getting into readers' hands, it doesn't matter. So how that can be addressed is a number of ways, and some of which we are seeing. It just needs to be done at a much larger scale. As far as DC, they are doing some things. They've got the DC Walmart Giants for $5, although I've seen some are reduced to $4. It's a really big comic. A lot of the stories are reprints, but you know, I think that's a good start, basically because it's getting comic books into people's hands again. And there's thousands more Walmarts than there are comic book shops. One thing they need to do, though, is move the DC Giants to like the checkout lanes or somewhere where people can find them. And they seem like maybe they're only at the Walmart Supercenters, because I always see them, but I go to a Walmart Supercenter. I've heard tons and tons of people say they can't find them or that they're always sold out. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's a lot that could be done with the DC Giants. Another thing that Marvel is doing that's actually good is their True Believers line. So these are also reprints, but they're only $1. So that's what we need. That's the kind of thing you need. Put those in checkout lanes, put them at the dollar store, just put them everywhere. You know, reprints for $1. The people will gobble those up. There's no reason those wouldn't sell. You could sell as many as you could print. Honestly, you do reprints of, like, you know, Spider-Man and Black Panther and stuff, they would sell just fine. So one thing that's also being done as far as print is Alterna Comics. So, you know, I'm a big fan and supporter of Alterna. They've got the right idea. They're using the old school newsprint, so that saves them some money, and they've got the really affordable cover price. The trick with them right now is just getting the word out. So again, accessibility. If there were more comic book shops, if there were more places that sold comics, there would be more ways Alterna could get into people's hands. So the big argument for why people don't think print matters so much is because digital comics exist. Well, yes, this is true, but digital comic sales haven't really increased in almost a decade. They really flatlined. So, by and large, if someone's going to pay money for a comic, they want a physical comic. Some people will buy digital for sure. I do sometimes. They are really good for doing reviews, but when you just look at the sales numbers overall, digital's still a fraction of what print comics sell. So really, you got to get the comics out there. It's just like your product, if it isn't available to people, can't be sold. And there's only so many people who are willing to go online and buy the comics, and I do that too, but it's really hard as far as getting them on, you know, you're not going to get them the day they come out the way you would if you could go to a comic book shop. So another big issue as why comics as a whole are collapsing, I think, is that it's an aging market. You look at the median age for a person who actually buys comic books, it's usually around 35. So we really need to increase interest in printed comic books in young people. So I think there are some things that are helping with that. This new Shazam movie, I think, is a step in the right direction. Part of why I was concerned about it being PG-13 is that not as many really young children are going to be able to see this movie. So I was kind of hoping for a PG rating. That way, more people that are like, you know, 10, 11, 8, 9, right in there, will see it and say, oh, that's great, I want to go and get some Shazam comics, you know, and they'll be lifelong fans. Another good thing that's in this vein is the DC Superhero Girls. This is the one that's targeted right for little girls, and everything I've seen about it shows a really wholesome, good show. So I think it's pretty nice, and it's definitely empowering and giving them good messages and stuff. So I think that's a step in the right direction, and it introduces little girls to lots of DC characters. So they have many to choose from. It's not only Batgirl and Wonder Woman, they've got Poison Ivy and Katana and Bumblebee and lots of other characters. So it's pretty neat. I actually think it's a really positive thing to do. And there is actually DC Superhero Girls line of comic books, so there you go. It's basically a gateway to comics. Boys version is just DC action. It's pretty cool too. It's, it's just the same idea, but more geared for boys. And then they also are coming out with a Super Pets movie, so I did a video about that, and I think that is a really good idea and a good way to get kids interested in comics. Because when you put aside all the ideological things, if there was a steady flow of young people coming into the comic book market, it really wouldn't matter as much about all of us salty adults arguing on Twitter. Us boycotting each other and whatnot wouldn't hurt the overall sales so much if there was hundreds of thousands of new comic readers coming into the industry every year. So I think a big problem though is printed comics in particular are competing with, it's just a new world. They're competing with the internet and cell phones and movies and video games and everything. So it's not like the 60s or 70s when the comics were everywhere and it was a big form of entertainment. Now a lot of kids just aren't going to want to sit down and read. So my hopes are that the new movies and things will bring some more youth into it, but comics as a whole might just become even more of a niche industry than it already is. So let me know down below what you think. What are your thoughts on how comic books as a whole can be saved? I mean, there's a big push to do basically independent comics. People are self-publishing, people are using Kickstarter and Indiegogo and stuff. And that's definitely filling, to me, that's kind of like a stopgap measure. It's helping, but really at the end of the day, I want the whole comics industry to be happy and healthy and thriving. So let me know down below what your ideas are and what you thought about mine, and maybe we can brainstorm and figure something out. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to hit the bell for notifications. Check me out on Patreon for exclusive content. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And as always, thank you for watching and being a part of DC Fans United.
End of line.